The fight for accountability at Micalago Road. Debunking the Council's likely arguments with irrefutable evidence, number 151. Good evening, friends and residents. It's been a busy week, and with everything unfolding, it's only going to get busier. To save time responding individually to the many emails and calls about this issue, here's the latest update on the Micalago Road situation, an issue that could escalate into the region's most significant environmental crisis to date. While past crises like bushfires or historical mining impacts were driven by natural disasters or legacy pollution, the Micalago landfill issue is a preventable man-made disaster, worsened by regulatory failure. If no urgent action is taken, the consequences could be long-term, expensive, and devastating for local residents, agriculture, and public health. Summary of the motion for independent audit. On March 20, 2025, the Snowy Monaro Regional Council, SMRC, will vote on a motion requesting an independent audit into the investigations, or lack thereof, regarding the alleged illegal dumping at Micalago Road. This motion, led by Councillor Luke Williamson, seeks to examine the quality and completeness of previous investigations into the dumping of unapproved materials at the site, the impact of pumping mine water onto neighboring properties and into local aquifers, whether regulatory agencies, such as SafeWork New South Wales and the EPA, were properly informed of contamination concerns, a full audit report to be presented to Council, ensuring public transparency. Why this motion matters. Council is already on record admitting to issuing a prevention notice, 2022, and a cleanup notice, 2023. This is direct proof that compliance violations occurred. Council emails confirm that beneficial reuse material was advertised for the site despite being unauthorized. Asbestos and contaminated materials have been independently identified outside the site, yet Council continues to resist accountability. Public resources, ratepayer money, have been used to repair damage caused by the heavy trucking of materials under a DA that appears to have been poorly regulated. Despite these facts, the gang of 6 councillors and council executives are likely to oppose the audit. Their primary arguments are probably going to be along the following ideas. Below, we dismantle them with irrefutable, documented evidence. 1. Council will likely take the stance: we monitored compliance and took action when needed. The argument. Council may claim that issuing a prevention notice in December 2022 and a cleanup notice in October 2023 demonstrates their commitment to enforcement. They will likely argue that random inspections, certification requirements for fill, and monitoring of heavy vehicle activity were sufficient to ensure the development complied with regulations. Councillors, in particular Tanya Higgins, have previously claimed that compliance officers worked hard to resolve the situation and that additional scrutiny is unnecessary. The facts. Council's enforcement was delayed, weak, and ineffective. Fact 1. A cleanup notice was issued in 2023, meaning a violation had already occurred. Compliance should prevent violations, not react after the damage is done. Fact 2. Emails from Council confirm that BRU beneficial reuse material was advertised for the site. If compliance was properly monitored, why was this allowed to be marketed? Beneficial reuse material, BRU, is a classification that allows processed construction and demolition waste, such as crushed concrete, bricks, asphalt, and even potentially contaminated soil, to be repurposed. But unlike virgin excavated natural material, VNM, BRU can contain residual pollutants, heavy metals, or asbestos, if not properly screened, making it a major environmental and health risk when dumped in sensitive areas like groundwater recharge zones or former mining sites. Fact 3. No independent evidence exists proving that Council ever tested the materials at the site before community complaints forced them to act. Perhaps there is evidence, but if it isn't made available to the public, how are we to know? Council's claim that Venom certification was reviewed relies on paperwork provided by the developer, not independent verification. Legal precedent and best practice require random independent audits of landfill material. There is no publicly available evidence that Council conducted any before 2023. Fact 4. Asbestos-contaminated debris and heavy metals were found outside the site. If compliance was effective, how did these materials leave the designated area? Conclusion. If compliance was effective, why were multiple enforcement actions needed? Council's claim of proactive monitoring contradicts their own enforcement record. 2. Council may argue, there's no way to prove the contamination wasn't pre-existing. The argument. The Council and Gang of Six will likely claim that since Micalago Road was a former iron ore quarry, contamination, such as lead, heavy metals, or asbestos, may have existed long before the landfill operations began. They may argue that there is no way to separate contamination caused by past mining from any new issues arising from fill activities. They could say that, because of this uncertainty, additional investigations are unnecessary, as there's no way to establish direct causation. The facts. Council had a duty to establish pre-existing conditions before approving fill activities. Fact 1. If contamination was suspected to be pre-existing, why didn't Council conduct baseline soil and water testing before approving the DA? Council approved fill activities without establishing pre-existing contamination levels. If they now claim it was always there, this is an admission of regulatory negligence. Fact 2. Even if contamination was pre-existing, Council still had a legal obligation to ensure new fill activities didn't worsen the problem. The precautionary principle in environmental law dictates that where environmental harm is possible, preventative measures must be taken. Council took no such precautions. Fact 3. Independent water testing found spikes in aluminum, lead, and other heavy metals after fill operations began. If contamination was pre-existing, why weren't these levels consistently high before fill operations? So far, no historical water sample testing has shown this be the case. Perhaps evidence of prior contamination testing will avail itself, but thus far it hasn't. Conclusion. If Council claims contamination was always there, they are admitting to approving landfill activities without proper due diligence. They either failed to investigate or they knowingly ignored risks. Both are damning. 3. An independent audit is too expensive and unnecessary. The argument. The CEO has already suggested that funding for an independent audit has not been allocated and that there is no identified budget source. The Gang of Six will likely argue that Council resources should not be wasted on an unnecessary audit when previous inspections have already been conducted. They may say that Council has met all legal obligations and that an audit would only confirm what they already know. The facts. Council has spent money on far less important matters while avoiding transparency. Fact 1. Council regularly spends money on consultants, external reports, and legal fees, yet claims there's no money for an audit into environmental safety and governance failures. Fact 2. The potential cost of not conducting an audit is far greater. If contamination spreads, ratepayers will bear the financial burden of cleanup. If regulations were ignored, Council could face legal liability and fines. Fact 3. If Council is confident that all regulations were followed, why resist an audit? If they truly believe they have acted properly, an independent audit would validate their claims. Conclusion. The financial argument is a smokescreen. Council has the ability to allocate funds where it chooses and has chosen not to prioritize accountability. If they oppose an audit, it's because they fear what it will reveal. Final verdict. The Council's defenses do not hold up. 1. If compliance monitoring was effective, why did violations occur and require a cleanup order? 2. If contamination was pre-existing, why wasn't this determined before approving the DA? 3. If an independent audit is unnecessary, why is Council resisting it instead of proving their case? What this means for the community. I don't believe that the Council's likely resistance is genuinely about resources, it's about protecting themselves. This motion must pass, or it will set a precedent that environmental violations in Snowy Monaro go unchallenged. Now is the time for public pressure. Demand transparency, demand accountability, demand the truth.